Some moments in time are frozen forever, etched into our memories like ice that never melts. We revisit those turning points that define a lifetime and change the course of destiny. Click subscribe now to explore these powerful, frozen fragments of the human experience.
You need to understand what my own daughter said to me the day she found out I'd bought a house on the lake. Not called to congratulate me, not stopped by to see it. She showed up with her husband and 2 suitcases and said, "We figured we'd move in and help you manage the place, Mama. Fresh start for all of us." I was 67 years old, standing in my own doorway, and I felt the exact same thing I'd felt 3 years earlier when she told me I needed to find somewhere else to live. Like the floor had dropped out from under me. Except this time I didn't move. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here. For 41 years, I was Roland's wife. I say that first because that's how most people knew me. As his wife, then as his widow, and somewhere in between as a mother, a grandmother, a woman who kept the household running so quietly that nobody noticed until the machinery stopped. Roland worked in commercial insurance. Good money, steady work, long hours. I managed everything else. The children, the house on Sycamore, the bills, the holidays, the doctor appointments, the arguments, the reconciliations. I was the one who remembered which teacher my daughter's son couldn't stand, which medication my son-in-law was allergic to, which anniversary my daughter had been quietly hurt about for 6 years. Roland died on a Thursday in March 4 years ago. Cardiac event, they called it. Fast. He was here and then he wasn't. And I sat in the hospital waiting room for 2 hours before a doctor came to tell me what I already knew when the paramedics' faces went flat. My daughter flew in from Atlanta the next morning. My son drove from Charlotte that same night. For the first 2 weeks, the house was full. Relatives I hadn't seen in years, neighbors bearing casseroles, my grandchildren sitting quietly on the stairs because no one had told them where to put their sadness. I fed everyone. I organized. I thanked people. I didn't cry in front of anyone until the 3rd week, alone in Roland's closet with the door shut, with my face pressed into one of his flannel shirts. After the funeral, after the relatives went home, after the condolence cards stopped coming, that was when things started to change. My daughter had 2 children under 6 and a husband who worked in real estate development. They were, as she often reminded me, stretched thin. My son lived 40 minutes away, visited on holidays, called on Sundays. Nice enough. But it was my daughter who started coming around more, staying longer, bringing the children, which I loved. I love those grandchildren more than I can say. But I started to notice things. She'd refer to the guest room as the kids' room. She'd rearrange my kitchen and not put things back. Small things. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself she was grieving too, in her way, and that her way looked like nesting. Then, 8 months after Roland's funeral, she sat me down at my own kitchen table and told me she and her husband had been thinking. The house in Atlanta wasn't working for them anymore. Too far from the school they wanted, too small with a 3rd baby on the way. And this house, she said, this house was too big for just me. I was rattling around in it. She could see I was lonely. And wouldn't it make more sense, she said, looking at me with her father's eyes, if they just moved in? I asked her what that would mean exactly. She said I'd have family around all the time. The grandchildren would be right here. Her husband could handle the yard and the maintenance stuff that she knew I'd been struggling with. She made it sound like a gift. I asked her where she thought I would sleep. She said we could convert the sunroom. It was a lovely little space. Very cozy. The sunroom. 12 by 14 feet, no closet, thin windows. The room I'd used as a sewing room for 20 years. That was where she'd put me. I told her I needed to think about it. She said she understood, and she squeezed my hand, and she left. And I sat at that kitchen table until it got dark. I thought about it for 3 weeks. I prayed about it. I called my oldest friend, Wileen, who lives out in New Mexico now, and she listened for 40 minutes without saying anything and then said, "Corinne, honey, don't you do it." But I thought, she's my daughter. She's grieving. The grandchildren. Maybe Wileen doesn't understand. Maybe I was being rigid. Maybe this is what family looks like and I was too proud to accept it. I said yes. I moved my sewing machine into the hall closet. I moved my clothes into the armoire in the sunroom. I put my good jewelry in a shoebox on the top shelf. I made room. They moved in 6 weeks later. Her husband, whose name I will not bother to dignify here any more than I have to, came in that first evening and set up a beer cooler in the garage and called it his space. My daughter put her children's drawings on the refrigerator over the photographs I'd had there since my grandchildren were born. Nobody asked. Nobody noticed. I told myself this would take adjustment. I told myself all families go through this. What I did not tell myself, because I was not ready to see it clearly. My daughter looked right through me in my own home. She made dinner decisions and grocery lists and school pickup schedules, and none of them included asking me anything. I became, in my own house, a kind of pleasant background presence. Someone to hold the baby when she was busy. Someone to be thanked briefly and then forgotten. The money became the next conversation. Roland had left me the house, paid off, and a life insurance policy, and his pension. Not wealthy, comfortable. Enough. I had my own small savings and I received Social Security, which covered my personal expenses. But 6 months after they moved in, my daughter came to me with a spreadsheet. She and her husband had been thinking, she said again, and since I was benefiting from their presence, someone to help with the house, someone to be here in case of an emergency. Maybe it made sense for me to contribute to the household costs. She showed me a number. It was just under half my monthly income. I looked at that spreadsheet for a long time. I looked at my daughter. I thought about the sunroom. I thought about the photographs on the refrigerator. I said I'd think about it. That night I called Wileen again. She said, "Corinne, baby, get your documents." I didn't know what she meant at first. Then I did. Roland had been a careful man. Not an emotional man, not always. He was practical, precise, the kind of person who kept a fireproof box under the bed and knew exactly what was in it. After the funeral, I had opened it once, taken out what I needed for the estate paperwork, closed it, and pushed it back under the bed. I hadn't gone back. That night, I got down on my knees on the hardwood floor and pulled it out. There was more in there than I'd seen. Beneath the will and the insurance documents and the titles I'd already processed, there was a second, smaller envelope, sealed. My name written on it in Roland's handwriting. My hands were not steady when I opened it. It was a letter. 2 pages, handwritten, dated 8 months before he died. He'd known something was coming. The doctors had flagged his heart, though we'd both pretended they hadn't. And he had written it like a man who wanted to make sure I understood certain things. He wrote about the lake property. I didn't know about the lake property. 43 acres outside of Macon, Georgia, that his father had left him and that he'd been paying taxes on quietly for 30 years. He'd never mentioned it because he said, and this broke something in me when I read it. He said he wanted me to have something that was only mine, something nobody else had ever had a claim to or a conversation about or an opinion on. He wrote, "When the time comes that you need to be somewhere that is fully yours, Corinne, this is it." He had put my name on the deed in 2021. He had been paying the taxes from a separate account I didn't know about, which had a remaining balance of a little over $14,000, account information enclosed. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, that I was about to start paying rent in, and I read that letter 4 times. Then I made 2 phone calls, one to Wileen and one to a real estate attorney whose name I'd found in the church directory 3 months earlier and never had a reason to use. The meeting with the attorney was a Tuesday morning. I told my daughter I had a hair appointment. I took the bus. The property, he told me, was legitimately mine, clear title, no liens, taxes current. The land had appreciated considerably. We were talking about something close to $300,000 in current market value, possibly more depending on how I approached it. I cried in his office. Not in front of him. I excused myself to the bathroom and let it out there quietly, the way I'd learned to cry in small spaces. I came home and I did not say a word. Over the following 4 months, I did what Wileen had always said I should do and never quite had. I got quiet and I got organized. I met with the attorney 3 more times. I looked into what a modest house on a lake in Georgia actually cost to build, and what it cost to buy, because there was a small existing structure on the land that a local contractor said was worth renovating rather than replacing. I used the $14,000 from Roland's account to begin. I transferred things carefully. I said nothing. My daughter, during this time, sent me another spreadsheet. She also suggested, in a very gentle voice, that perhaps we should look into whether I was still comfortable managing my own finances, given my age. She mentioned that her husband could help oversee things, just to make sure nothing slipped through the cracks. I smiled and said I appreciated that. I moved out on a Wednesday in October, early morning before anyone was up. I had been packing the sunroom gradually for 6 weeks, a few things at a time, things no one noticed. I had arranged for a friend from church to let me stay with her for 2 weeks while the renovations finished. I left a note on the kitchen table. I told my daughter I loved her. I told her the house was hers to sort out, which she should know meant the mortgage too, because there was no longer a mortgage. But there were property taxes and utilities and maintenance. All the things I had been handling for 41 years that she did not know about because she had not thought to ask. I did not put my new address on the note. I did not hear from her for 11 days. When she called, she cried. She said she'd had no idea. She said she'd been worried sick. She said she didn't understand why I'd left without telling her. I let her talk, and then I asked her, gently, the way she'd spoken to me about the spreadsheet, where she thought I had gone. She didn't have an answer. I told her I was fine. I told her I'd be in touch. The house on the lake was finished 6 weeks later. It is small by most measures. 2 bedrooms, a porch that runs the length of the back of the house, a dock that needs replacing in a year or two. The floors are old pine, and they creak, and I love them. The mornings are so quiet that I can hear the water from my bed. I have a kitchen that is arranged the way I arranged it, and photographs on my refrigerator that no one has moved. I was there for 4 months before my daughter found out. Her cousin mentioned it, I think. Or someone from church. I'm honestly not certain, and it doesn't matter. What matters is that she called me on a Tuesday evening in February, and her voice had a quality I hadn't heard in a very long time. Something between wonder and hunger. She said she'd heard I had a lake house. I said I did. She said it sounded beautiful. I said it was. There was a pause. And then she said she'd been talking to her husband, and they'd been thinking, and they wanted to make things right between us. They wanted to come and spend some time, help me get settled, make things right. She said they could take the 2nd bedroom. The children would love the lake. I held the phone and looked out at the water. A heron was standing at the edge of the dock, utterly still. I said, "Let me think about it." I thought about it for 1 week. Then I called my attorney and asked him to draw up something specific. I had him draft a family agreement. Not a legal document with teeth, exactly, but a written understanding, signed, that covered certain things clearly. That the house was mine and mine alone. That any visits required advance notice of no less than 2 weeks. That no changes to the property, none, would be made without my written consent. That no third party, meaning her husband, would have any involvement in my finances, my estate, or my decision-making of any kind. And there was one more thing. I wrote a section about respect. What it looked like, what it required, that my space was my space. That my choices were my choices. That I would welcome them in love, but that love in this house would not look like tolerance of being managed or diminished or moved to a smaller room. I mailed it to her. She called me 3 days later. She was quiet in a way she hadn't been in a long time. She said some of it felt harsh. I said I understood. She said she loved me. I said I loved her too. She said she would sign it. Her husband did not call me. That was fine. They came in April, just my daughter and the 3 grandchildren, as it turned out. Her husband had a thing for work. She didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. We sat on the porch the first evening with the children running down to the water, and she looked at the lake for a long time without saying anything. Then she said, "Daddy knew about this place?" I said he did. She said, "Why didn't he ever bring us here?" I said he was saving it. She looked at me then, really looked, the way she hadn't in years. And I saw something move across her face, not guilt exactly, not shame, something more complicated. Something that might, in time, become understanding. We didn't talk about the spreadsheet. We didn't talk about the sunroom. We have not talked about those things yet, and maybe we won't. Maybe some things get left in the past, like furniture you don't move to the new house because you need to start with what fits. What I know is this. I am 67 years old, and I wake up every morning in a house that smells like pine and lake water and coffee that I make the way I like it, strong, in the small pot that's just the right size for one. I have a porch where I read until noon if I feel like it. I have a dock where I sit in the evenings and watch the light go flat over the water. Roland knew. He knew before I did that I would need a place that was entirely mine. He put my name on that deed in 2021, and he kept it quiet, and he wrote me a letter, and he trusted me to find it when I was ready. I found it. I'm standing in it. And the door, my door, the one I painted myself in the first week, a particular shade of blue that I picked because I liked it, and for no other reason, opens from the inside.